Northwest this Wednesday afternoon. Now, Aengus Kennedy from Nature Northwest has joined me in the studio. Aengus, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to be here.
Lots to talk about today, so let's get stuck in. First of all, according to a new report from the EU, the average air temperature last month was warmer than any previous April on record. Now, we can laugh about it. Well, we wouldn't mind some of them temperatures here. This is around the world, and it's a growing trend, and it's unfortunate, and it has consequences.
I would say it's an awful lot more than unfortunate. I say it's frightening. We've known about climate change, and we've known about the consequences of burning fossil fuels, thanks for a very long time. And yet we haven't done anything about it. And for the last 30 years, we've talked about it. And only in the last few years do you start seeing meaningful action. And I wonder, and I hope it's not too little too late. The temperatures are really rising at an enormous rate. You hear people talking about 1.5 degrees at these various big conferences. And we need to try and keep the global temperature at 1.5 degrees. No more than 1.5 degrees above what it was pre-industrial times. In other words, before, kind of 150 years ago, before we started really ripping oil out of the ground at a ferocious rate. And last year, the temperature globally was about 1.6 degrees. So we've managed to hit that for a year. Now, they measure this in decades, not in years. So maybe it'll dip a tiny bit this year. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll increase again. But all of that added temperature adds more, for our point of view, it adds more moisture into the sky. And we're seeing that. Ask any landowner, ask any gardener, ask anybody going about their business in Ireland, in places like Spain and Italy. It increases the hot temperatures they already have. We've seen last year they were struggling with their tomatoes and their peppers and that kind of stuff, and as a result, our food prices raised. Were higher on the shelves in the summertime. Yeah. So it has ferocious consequences, and that's for us in the wealthy, the developed world, the world where we have a lot of resources, where we can look after ourselves. So you can just imagine what's happening in other parts of the world that don't have what we have.
So it's proper scary stuff, and it's time that we all woke up to it and tried to do a little bit somehow in whatever way.
Well, absolutely.
It's on us. We can't just say, well, that's big government, that's big business, but it's kind of on all of us.
It's on all of us, but also we have to remember that yes, we all need to be responsible about it, but I think the most important thing we need to do is we need to inform ourselves about it. We need to get our heads around this. This is real. This is what's happening. It's affecting us. It's already affecting us. It's already affecting our price of our fuel. It's affecting the price of our food. It's going to affect our travel in time to come. It's affecting our agriculture. And it's going to affect the next generation an awful lot more. And just this morning, a few leaflets came in the door from various different politicians, and there was one leaflet, I won't go naming any political parties, but there was one that said we need to reverse all this climate change nonsense, effectively, is what it said. And I was just shocked to see it. In 2024, there's people out there looking for election who are brave enough to print this kind of nonsense on their leaflets and push them through people's doors. Don't be fooled by these people. Talk to your politicians. Now is the best time. The politicians are coming around. They're looking for votes. They're looking for action. I remember a colleague of mine, probably about 8 years ago, 2 election cycles ago, maybe 10 years ago, asking Leo Varadkar, she lives in Leo Varadkar's area, what are you going to do about climate change? And he said, in 3 weeks, you're the first person who's asked me. So it's not a big issue at the doors, was what he said. Now, that's a long time ago. Make it an issue. Obviously, we want them to address our housing and our health and whatever other the issues that we have. But talk to your politicians about climate change, because most of them out there, maybe not the ones printing those leaflets, but most of them out there are good people. They want to try and do the right thing by Ireland. And we need to give them a mandate to do that. They're the ones who can force the companies to change, and they're the ones that can help us all in the change.
Yeah, it's timely, given that there's an election looming. So, bring it up on the doorsteps.
Bring it up on the doorsteps. And on a tiny note of optimism, because it's not the most cheerful way to start a show. I've been in a few different schools over the last few weeks that have had solar panels fitted, and they're getting free solar panels on all the schools. That's over 4,000 roofs. Over 4,000 schools in Ireland are being fitted over the next couple of years. And it's fantastic. And you could see on the graphic, you could see 13 kilowatts being used by the school at the time. 11 was coming from the grid, on the national grid. 2 was coming, as one young child said to me, free from the sky. So it was coming straight off the roof. And that was a rainy day in April, when it was already that free effectively energy was coming in for them. It's a very good scheme, but the great thing about, the best bit about it, was talking to the fitters, the roofers. And they had spent the last couple of years training up so that they could do this, and now they have contracts as far as they can see, and they say, the lads I was talking to said they'll be fitting solar panels for the rest of their days, and there's an awful lot of work there. It's good, clean work there. So there's opportunities amongst this as well. We have the solutions, we know what to do, there's going to be a lot of jobs for people, but we need to get our heads around it, and we need to help our politicians get their heads around it.
Okay, so maybe things are moving in the right direction, but they just need to go from walking pace to running pace.
Yeah, they do, but they are changing. They are changing, yeah.
National Biodiversity Week is coming up. It's from the 17th, and it'll be celebrated not just here in Donegal but around the country. The whole aim is to connect people with nature, and there's going to be lots of walks and talks, and we can learn more about biodiversity in in our neck of the woods. And you're involved in some of them. I see there's one in Ramelton. In fact, it's an early start for you in Ramelton. I'm guessing you're involved in this one, the Dawn Chorus one.
I am indeed, yeah. I love May. I think it's my favourite month. There's so much amazing nature in Donegal. It's such a fantastic place to live, as we all know. But May, I think, it's at its peak. The cuckoos have come back. The corncrakes are back in place. The willow warblers, the sedge warblers, the corn buntings, the swallows, the swifts, and you can go on and on. All of these various different migratory birds have arrived back to Donegal because this is a great place to be, because they've got shelter here, they've got food here. The temperature is currently about right here for them. And of course, they all shout their heads off first thing in the morning. I've been getting lots of texts and emails, people asking me, what is this bird? What does this sound outside? Yeah. People are really noticing it. So on the 18th, we're going to meet at 4:30 in Ramelton in Gamble Square, and we're going to try and get up when the very first birds are getting up, and we'll start identifying them, and we'll walk down following the shore and down along the edge of the Swilly there, the edge of the Lennon, and listen to the bird song.
Because from what I can gather, when I'm out and about, you could listen at any time of the day. It just seems to be lots of bird song, and you could listen at any time of the day, right up until it's almost dark, and there's loads of birds singing. But dawn is the best time.
Well, dawn's the very best. And when you think about it, the birds, the way they can, and all the troubles going on in the world at the moment, if we took a leaf out of the birds book, birds proclaim their territory. They erect their fences, they build their walls, etc. by singing. So they rarely fight. Very, very occasionally they do, but very rarely do they fight, really. So they sing to each other, and it's the males that sing, and they tell each other, this is my territory, this is occupied. And of course, they're trying to attract a mate as well. And all of the birds do it, but they're singing to the same species. It's the robin singing to the robin, the chaffinch, the chaffinch. And very first thing, just when that very first bit of light comes out, it's still too dark for them to go foraging for insects, which is what they'll feed to their young. But it's a perfect time for singing. So they see that bit of light, and the very first birds that wake up are the ones with the biggest eyes, proportionately, really. So the thrushes, the robin, and the wren as well. They're some of the very first ones that'll start to sing, and then they're joined in shortly after by all the others, proclaiming their territory, telling everybody that they're fit, they're well, they made it through the night.
Is it one species talking to the other, or do they also do things like warn off any birds or things like that in their bird?
Yeah, so they cheep and they chirp all year round. But there's only really two birds that sing the whole year round. That's the robin and the wren, because they're about the only birds that hold a territory. And the way they hold a territory is by singing. So when they're singing, when you hear that beautiful song from whatever bird it is, it's talking to the same species. It's not talking to us, not talking to the other birds. I'm talking to the same species, saying this patch is taken, and of course reminding the female, look how fit, how strong I am, I can continue to provide food, etc. for the nest. But they have a series of different alarm calls. They have specific alarm calls for a sparrowhawk, for instance, if a sparrowhawk appears. And that's to all birds, and that's that kind of safety in number. All birds will chirp and cheep and tell each other if there's a cat or a pine marten or a sparrowhawk or something coming.
Okay, and then at the opposite end of the day, there's bat walks.
Yeah, so there's a huge amount of different events going on in Biodiversity Week. I'm only involved in a couple of them. There's an awful lot of different things. There's bat walks been run by Bat Conservation Ireland, and it's well worth. The bat walks are great fun. We had one last night, actually, organised by Letterkenny Tidy Towns, and we saw lots of bats in and around about Letterkenny Park. It was great fun. But the Bat Conservation Ireland have a brilliant website. It's very accessible, very kid-friendly, well worth having a look at, and they'll have the various events. There's marine shore exploring, seashore exploring. There's a whole bunch of different events going on. And at the end of the week, something to definitely stick in the diary if you're interested in climate change or if you're interested in biodiversity, at 10:30 on Saturday the 25th, in St. Eunan's GAA Club, we're going to have a panel talk. There's going to be a whole bunch of different environmental groups showcasing their wares. But we're very excited to have Lorraine Arbuckle. We're going to have, who's the climate coordinator. So there's a whole climate team now in Donegal County Council, only in place the last year. So this will be one of the first opportunities for a lot of people to meet her and to hear what she's got to say. We're going to also meet Julie Corrie, who is the Biodiversity Officer, who's organised a lot of these events. So thanks, Julie, for that. She's done a huge amount of work in the last few months building up to this. But she's going to have an opportunity to talk about her vision for some of the biodiversity and the changes. And we're going to have Gerard McDade, who's an agricultural lecturer in the ATU. And he is going to deliver a short talk on some of the opportunities that are there for biodiversity and farming and whatnot. And we'll have a panel discussion then open for questions. So if you want to meet your new Donegal County Council, so our climate team or our new biodiversity officer, the 25th of May, St. Eunan's GAA Club at 10:30 is the time.
And full details on all the events that are led by or supported by the County Council can be seen at donegalcoco.ie. No Mow May is a thing, and what it is really it's saying, listen, we shouldn't, or if we can at all, don't mow the lawn in May, and help plants to recover and provide ecosystem support, which is all very well, but it's not nice sitting in watching just the lawn get bigger and bigger, knowing that it's going to be a right old mess by the time you get to it.
Yeah, it needs to be managed to some extent. So that's for sure. But as we know, so much of our biodiversity is in trouble, and insects are the basis for so much of that life. And we think of the bumblebees and the bumblebee that loves the dandelion or loves whatever flowers, the clover and the rest of it that's coming up in your lawn. But it's not just about them. It's about so many of the tiny insects that are feeding those birds that are singing. We want to hear the birds singing, but then some people don't want the insects that those birds rely on. So start off, if you're nervous about No Mow May, start off with a corner, start off with one patch, and just let it grow and see what appears. And you will be, if you haven't sprayed your lawn too much with too many chemicals, you'll be amazed at the amount of different seeds that appear, because our lawns, the soil underneath our grass, they're seed banks, and an awful lot of different wildflowers will survive in there for a very long time, waiting for the conditions to be right. And the conditions are just for us to back off a little bit.
I think that's a better idea, actually, suggesting that maybe we should just leave a wee corner of the lawn that we don't mow, because to suggest that we leave the whole of the lawn and don't cut it for a full month, because then most people will be thinking, I'm going to have a real job the first time I have to get back to this. So to leave a corner maybe for the whole year that you don't touch and just see how it develops.
And see how it develops, and no matter what, you'll be able to trim it down anyway come the end of the summer, and it doesn't matter kind of what has grown there, a strimmer will take it. So if it's a small enough area, that won't be too arduous. What I have done, for instance, in my own garden is we've two small lawns, and half of one of them I've let go, and wildflowers come up on it, and I trim that then every September and remove the trimmings, and that helps keep the wildflowers coming back. And I've had orchids appear, I've had cuckoo flowers and trefoils and all sorts of amazing flowers that just weren't there when we moved into the place.
You don't have to plant anything, just use just let it be.
You're often better off not planting things, and the seeds will find their own way there. And by doing that, then the other half of the lawn will have a few trees in it, and a few beautiful crabapple trees, which are in full blossom at the moment. They're gorgeous, and the hoverflies love them. But that gives us space to sit out in the lawn or to play football, as we were doing yesterday with one of my daughters, that kind of thing. So we need to leave space for us to be able to live and do the activities we like. But you've got to leave space for nature, and you've got to remember these things have all been trying to have this cycle since before we were here. And we've come along, we've pushed them aside for our own reasons. Leave a little patch, and if everybody leaves a patch, and then you'll suddenly see the joy of all of these different insects that are coming. The very first year that I let the grasses grow long, I got two different butterflies that love grasses, and that appeared that had never been in the garden before. So nature will come, and it's gorgeous to see it.
And then if you want to strim it back, that can be done, around October?
Yeah, so, even earlier than that. You can do that end of August, early September is a good time. You trim it, you leave it for a week or two so the seeds dry up and fall off, and then you remove the clippings. Because what you're trying to do the opposite of what a lot of the farmers are trying to do for grass growth. They're trying to fertilise the ground and plant the ryegrass and the clovers and the rest of it, and try and have good grass for the cattle. We want to not fertilise the ground, because that's what the wildflowers prefer. So for your garden patch, remove those trimmings, don't put any fertilisers, and keep the chemicals free. The other thing as well is if you look up pollinators.ie, they've a huge amount of resources, and it'll tell you how to do a tiny little 1 metre square patch right up to a huge big meadow in a park. And it'll tell you the kind of plants that you can buy at different seasons to provide cover for the pollinators as well, or for the various insects. And all those resources are free. They're very attractive, and they're all there for free. Pollinators.ie is the website.
Okay. Speaking of pollinators and plants, this is a good time to actually see some of our native plants, woodland plants, and you've brought in some brochures, which are very colourful, and just when I look at them, because I wouldn't really recognise the names, but I certainly know them to see. And they're very common, and now's a good time.
Now's a fantastic time. Well, for the woodland plants in particular, when you think about it, so for the next few weeks, we're in the longest days now of the year, for the next 12 weeks or so. There's a huge amount of light, so all sorts of flowers are appearing in our hedgerows and all sorts of places. But up until now, it's been difficult for the woodland flowers. So the woodland flowers, if they come out too early, there'll be no bumblebees, it'll be too cold. So if they come out in early March, no good, there's no insects there to pollinate them. And that's, of course, what the flowers are for. If they come out too late in the woods, if they wait until June and July when there's plenty of sunshine, we hope, the canopy of the woods will have closed over, because the oak trees are starting to really wake up now and get into their strides. The aspen trees haven't quite woken up, but they're just starting. So in the next week or two, we'll see. So the woods will get considerably darker in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So right now, you go to the likes of Ballyar, onto Ballyar Woods, go to Drumbo Woods, have a look at Ard's Friary. They've been doing some amazing work in helping their pollinators. And in fact, just recently in Ard's Friary, they planted, I think it was about 2,000 oak trees, which were collected in Glenveigh. So they've been doing some fantastic work. But you get an awful lot of the celandines, the wood anemones, and then oceans of bluebells. It's beautiful. So any of those native, but it has to have native trees. Any of those native woodlands will just give you such joy over the next couple of weeks. Okay.
And, common plants, as you say, bluebells and celandines, and ones we're all familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the woodland ones are quite specific. So those ones that come out now. So you go into the woods in another month and a half, and an awful lot of those flowers will have finished. But then we'll start seeing the flowers in the grasslands a lot more. And they'll take over because there'll be more light, more sunshine.
So if you're walking in the woods these weeks, just keep an eye out for the abundance of plant life.
Another thing I've noticed a huge amount of, and you'll see these often in places you wouldn't necessarily expect wildflowers. So it might be outside shopping centres or outside business parks and whatnot, is the little cuckoo flower. And it's a thin, delicate little flower, has 4 little pink petals. People will recognise it because this year seems to be a very good year for the cuckoo flower. And the cuckoo flower, it's vitally important for the orange tip butterfly. And anybody who's been out walking recently has seen these white butterflies with orange tips on their wings. Gorgeous butterflies. They're only out now for the couple of weeks. They lay their eggs onto the cuckoo flower, and then the caterpillar eats that cuckoo flower and then falls down to the grass and protects itself until next year. If we trim all those cuckoo flowers, if we mow all that stuff down, we then have no orange tip butterflies next year. Everything is linked in. So every time you're chopping down some dandelions or chopping down some of the lawn, you're destroying a whole generation of things. So that's why at least leave a little patch, and then you get great joy out of it.
Right, some questions for you, and there seems to be a lot in today. What happened to the bird in Ireland called the tomtit?
The tomtit would have been, I wonder, was that, I remember my parents talking about the tomtit, and would have been either the great tit or the coal tit, I'm pretty sure. So we've the great tit, the coal tit, and the blue tit. They all come to the feeders. I think it's just a colloquial name that changed. The great tit was often called the bicycle pump bird by my parents and their people. My Auntie Veronica, I remember in particular talking about the bicycle pump bird. And if you sit out in the garden today with a cup of tea, you'll hear a little bicycle pump, and that'll be the great tit.
What plants can you put in a wildlife pond?
In a wildlife pond, a wildlife pond will often feed itself, so plants will find their own way there. But you want to have various different oxygenating plants, so you want to have various different lilies and whatnot. And if you have a look again at that pollinators.ie, and they will be able to show you plants that are suitable for the wetlands. There's a whole big list of them, but some of them can be a little bit invasive, so they don't include those. But pollinators.ie will guide you towards the right ones for there. But creating a pond is one of the very best things that you can do for nature. A shallow pond, even if it dries out in the summer, it doesn't matter. There'll be a huge amount of life in there, and that's a wonderful thing to do.
And finally, could you ask Aengus, my cat got in at a bird nest built inside a stone wall last night, pulled out a baby chick, no feathers yet. It was still living. We got the cat away. I put the chick back into the nest, and I think, as I can't see it properly, that the mum was going mad up in the trees when the cat was in the nest. Will she go back to her chick now to look after it?
She might well. She might well. The fact you got it in nice and quickly, and then just keep that cat indoors if you can. Cats kill a vast amount of birds, and people don't like me or others talking about that. But our own
It's their natural instinct.
It's their natural instinct. We put a bell on the cat. Try and keep it inside as much as you possibly can. But there is a very good chance. Keep a big distance though. The other thing that you could do is, you could put just a little tiny handful of uncooked porridge on a couple of the rocks nearby, and that might help to attract the mum and the dad back into the area a little bit. They'll still be watching. They'll normally abandon it. You'd know after 24 hours or so if they'd completely abandon it. But if you're quick, there's a very good chance.
Okay, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks,
yeah.
Aengus. Chat to you soon.
Thanks, John.